Hello everyone. We are here today to advance with a very honorable guest, Edwin Diender. That is, he has a lot of profiles worldwide, but you're going to be interviewing him, and his main role worldwide is Chief Digital Transformation Officer and Vice President, Government and Public Sector Business Department for Huawei Technologies. And as well as an academic and researcher that has been working with universities around the world and has been having very high-profile roles in different areas of the industry. So welcome to a new citiesabc.com interview from our series of interviews highlighting profiles and personalities that are leaders in the world in their areas of expertise in technology, governance, and cities. So Cities ABC was built to unite collaborating people around the world that are focused on innovation and technology and solutions of social impact for cities. And of course, we are not in a normal world with a pandemic of COVID-19 and coronavirus changing everything we know about business and economics and social, but we have still to keep hope. So this interview will be about the profile of Edwin Diender. And I don't know if I'm pronouncing it well, but we're going to be talking about this profile and this overview. It's a pleasure to have you here, Diender, and we would like to start by probably spelling your name correctly, and as well to make sure that we give a bit of an overview about you and your background. It's an honor to have you.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor for me to join this great platform as well. I've been looking forward to it, actually. Not because we've been trying to prepare a lot for this, but just because it's a strong platform, and I think it's a very good baseline, so to speak, and it's a very good analogy and metaphor to the things that I'm doing in the company that I represent, which is also about platforms, digital platforms. The pronunciation of my last name, I think it depends a bit on where you come from, I'd say. I was born in the Netherlands, so with a thick Dutch accent, you would probably say Diender, or German-ish Diender. You can say it in French, John Dare or Jen Day. Yeah. You can say it in UK English, which is Diender, or you can say it in US English, American English, which I think is Diender. So I don't think it really matters how you pronounce it. You gave it two twists, and both are fine.
Okay, thank you so much. So, we have the geopolitics, which are more important than ever, but I think we should keep that out of the call for now. So I think starting by, you have a fantastic background from academic to as well research and business, which is three things that I deeply admire, especially someone that managed to take these three things. So could you tell us a bit about your background in Netherlands, as well as education and academic background, because I think that's very important for everyone in the world, and education is more important than ever.
Well, after high school, I went to college, the business economics track. I did a propedeuse at the University of Amsterdam, and then I thought I had enough of learning, so to speak, and I thought I should do something else. I joined a company in the Netherlands that was already working in a market space where at that time the national telecom company has been privatized. And I needed a place, like an intern. So I helped them with building up their customer pyramid and the principles for a marketing customer relationship management tool built on the customer-based management principles of Jay Curry. The father of, at that time in the Netherlands, a very famous radio DJ, Adam Curry. So Adam Curry is the son of Jay Curry, and Jay Curry is the inventor of the customer pyramid. And that's how I actually enrolled into a business environment. It was quite later, actually, in my career that I found that when I spoke to, let's say, people who follow a regular academic track, high school, college, university work, and who followed through with all of that, they were at a certain level and they were on par from the moment they were meeting each other. So when I entered a meeting room, I can give you one example. I was the chief marketing officer of an organization that at that time I was working for. I had a European role, and each time when we had executive meetings, it took me about 10, 12 minutes to get on par. So my management coach at that time advised me, maybe you should do an executive MBA and maybe you should finalize your university degree that you actually haven't done in the past years. You've done your college degree, and then the first year of university, you thought you had enough of learning, and let's go into the working space. And my career was quite nice, but I felt I missed some academic luggage, so to speak. So in 2007, 2008, I embarked on an executive MBA, which I passed on international business and marketing. And my research for that and my thesis for that apparently was good enough to eventually add a few items and grant me a PhD in economics for sustainability, building sustainable business models and circular economy principles, that environment, with a minor in psychology and philosophy. And that's a bit on my educational side, so to speak. If you look at my career from a company point of view, I've always been working for organizations that have started an initiative a few years ago, who developed that initiative, and who are at a crossroad, so to speak. So usually when I join an organization, it is most of the time regarding a question that relates to something like, are we still on the right path? Where is the next big thing? What is the next big wave? In the Netherlands, we have an expression that says, you're too big for the napkin, but you're too small for the tablecloth. That kind of idea. You're too big for the cafeteria, you're too small for the restaurant, that kind of idea. You're on a crossroad, and you don't have enough resources to do what you've always done, but you also don't have enough time to do this. So usually that's where I come on board. I find the next big thing, and I found a few. Well, not so much big things, but I found big things for companies that I worked for. So different kinds of initiatives were introduced at the end of the 90s. IP communications as a service for a monthly fee, where communications at that time was digital and analog. From phone system point of view, for example, the abbreviation ICT meant information and communication technology, but I turned it into the integration of the computer and the telephone. Because at that time, that was a solution that was coming in out of the US, and Europe didn't have it yet. And I was able to put it into a monthly fee and roll that out across Europe. So that's a bit of the ignition, so to speak, of my career. I have moved from vendors, creating new business models and help set up industry solution sales practices and sustainable businesses, find new partner base. And usually what happens after a few years is either I get bored or the company gets bored of me. So there's a new initiative, either within the company, but sometimes I just moved to the partner that we found to help embark in this great idea. And then I went from there after 2.5, 3 years to an end customer that actually makes use of the solution that I kind of co-developed when I worked for different companies. And that's a bit of the cycle in my career. So from a vendor to the partner base and the integrator to the end customer, and then back to another kind of vendor, finding a new partner base, entering that partner base, helping that partner base get up to speed, and then go to the customer side of the equation. In 2008, I was in contact with a great company in China called Huawei Technologies that had the idea to find foreigners, let them come to China and learn about this great company, and then perhaps over a couple of years' time, move back to where you come from and help branch out this idea of this great company. But in 2008, the global economy went down, Lehman Brothers went bankrupt, and early 2009, this initiative stopped. So I did something else. I went to the United States and I worked for a small company that wanted to go IPO. I was looking after the European channel, so I spent a few time in the US, then back to Europe. And I'm going to make a long story short. In 2011, August, September timeframe, I came back to Holland, joined my family again, sent out a message that I was available back in the country, so who's up for a cup of coffee? And at that time, Huawei had just established Huawei Enterprise Business Group in Europe. which at that time did not exist. So it was a completely new entity, a completely new strategic business unit in Huawei. And one of the first contacts that got back in touch with me was one of my contacts in 2008 in Huawei headquarters, who then said, I'm now trying to build out, and I'm now trying to build in Europe, Huawei Enterprise, and we're looking for people who maybe now can join. So tell us where your strengths are and how we can move forward. So on Christmas Eve 2011, I said yes to an employmentship in Huawei, West Europe, looking after the Netherlands first, then Belgium and Luxembourg, and then West Europe, to help set up industry solution sales practices for the West European region on behalf of Huawei Enterprise, in the domains of government, in the domains of public sector, healthcare, education, and private companies and what have you. And that's how I started working in Huawei. I think your microphone is on mute.
Yeah,
sorry.
I'm on mute. Sorry. No, sorry. So thank you so much. Fantastic insights, and two things that bear in mind to me about what you said. So let's go again to your studies, and I think the point one I would like to touch is your PhD in sustainable economy. Could you give us a bit of an overview, because I think that's particularly important for the world we're living today. And then the second point, and it's about precisely in 2008 there was a massive global crisis, and now we are starting probably even something more alarming. So I would like to make a parallel between the two things, because I think it's very important to look at history, to learn, of course, because history repeats itself in different ways and never repeats itself. But I think starting with your PhD studies, I think that's very important, especially how you look at from your MBA in international relations to sustainable economy in terms of PhD. How do you relate these things and how you apply these in your business? I think that's very important, because I think it's something that everyone speaks, but then it comes to reality, and then this is critical.
Well, I found the same. At that time, it was often said that the latest technology is adopted the fastest by the youngest people in a company, or the youngest people by the youngest. And that relates to the idea that if you're older, you're a little bit behind. If you're older, you have more trouble in understanding where new technology comes in. And I always found that very intriguing, because if I look at my dad has one of the first Twitter accounts in the Netherlands. And my dad is not one of the youngest, not even then, I can tell you. He's still very vivid, and he's very alive, so to speak. And he's not burdened with this coronavirus. My family's all fine on this, so, and I hope they can keep it like that, social distance. But I was always intrigued by the technology is for younger people, and technology is not for older people. And the reason why technology is not adopting in organizations is because of that. So the second thing that I was intrigued by is that the youngest son of my kid brother, of course, understands how to use technology. I remember when he was like 2 or 3 years old, he would stand in front of the flat screen, the television, and he would use his finger on the screen to flip channels, because he thought that it's the same thing as a tablet, right? So here's a young kid who understands technology, but he rather would be outside, play in the sandbox and be outside with the kids. And here's the other side of the spectrum where my dad is, and he has one of the first Twitter accounts in Holland. A young kid understands technology, would rather plays outside. And here's my dad, the grandfather to this young child, who has the youngest or the earliest Twitter account. So I looked into how the company that I was working for at that time was trying to bring solutions to market that relate to productivity. Some of the key messages, for example, from the sales management talks that we had with customers was, if you could be more efficient in your daily operations, and if you could be more productive, and if you could be more effective in your communications, by shortening the time for this and shortening the time for that and shortening the time that it takes to find people in the organization. But just, you have a chat box. You can see who is online, almost like Microsoft Messenger at that time as a tool. And with a right mouse click, you can send a message. Hey, I know you're in a meeting, but can we have a quick chat, because this is my question on an offer. So it was sold, these kind of solutions was sold very high up the value chain, a higher productivity, a very strong ROI. And what we found after 1 year, when we look back into the same customer base, that sometimes even more than 60, even 70% of the whole organization was not using the tool in such a way as it was sold to them and where the company bought it for. So after 1 year, it turned out that they weren't as productive as they could have been. They were not as efficient in their daily operations as they could have been. And they were certainly not so effective in their communications as they should have been if they used these tools right. So what I did at that time, I looked into how people are using these tools and how these tools are being brought to them. And I found a very compelling event. Over time and over the year, for example, when a telephone system goes from analog to digital and from digital to IP, and where computing comes in and where your database in your computer or where your email sits with your contacts, there's a link between your computer and your telephone system. You can click a name on your computer and then your phone would dial that number, for example. It's very productive. But there's also other forms how the new way of work and the new way of communication came in at that time. I'm talking halfway to 2000s in this particular case, 2005, 6, 7, that's the time frame I'm talking about right now. And it was sold in such a way that you would be productive, so the company would be more profitable, so to speak. But the way it was trained, the way the knowledge and the way the training and the certification for these kind of solutions were brought to the market were very old-fashioned. For example, how many front desk workers do you have? We have 40 front desk workers. Okay, we can take 4 classes of each 10 of the front desk workers and we will train all the front desk workers at once. So all of them understands how to use the new tooling and the new desktop application at the front desk. How many people do you have in your back office? We have 300 people in our back office. Okay, we can do classes of 10 people. So 30 classes of 10 people, and each of them one by one is just trained in the old-fashioned way. It's a class, 10 people within there. And sometimes you would make a division, or the training team would make a division saying, let's put the older people in one class, let's put the middle-aged people in another class, let's put the younger people in another class, and so on and so forth. Apparently, the result of this is that after 1 year of using a great tool that you've been trained to use in this way, doesn't stick with you as much. So it's sold with the latest key messages. It's brought to market. It is marketed in a great marketing machine that has the latest of how to do marketing at that time. But the way it's been introduced, the way it's been implemented, and the way it's been trained is in a very old-fashioned way, meaning not very sustainable. So I researched this. I looked into this. And because at the end of my academic track, I told you before, I've done a minor in philosophy and psychology. Out of these tracks came some insights, for example, on personas. And I tried to apply this in some trainings. So the next customer that we had, where we sold these ideas, I worked with the training and certification team by saying, maybe we shouldn't group in the old-fashioned way. Maybe we should group people and create classrooms of 10 people who are best linked together based on their persona, based on their characteristics, their personality traits. And then after 1 year, we looked back into this organization again, and we found, as a research team, that the solutions that we brought with the latest messages of productivity and the training that we gave them, not in the old-fashioned way, but bringing them together, not based on their age, for example, or based on their job role, but based on their personas and their personality characteristics, that the training we gave them resonated better, stuck with them more profound. And as a result, they actually started to like using the solution. So rather a training on how to use it, in a user training, it becomes a training that taps into your personality. It creates a good feeling of it. And I was looking back into the different deployments that we've done over the years, and I found that the best way to be sustainable, so to build a sustainable business model, is to have it end-to-end, including a new idea in training and certification and user training, that kind of thing. And indeed, that creates sustainable business models. So business sustainability became a part of, and sustainable economics became part of my thinking. And as a result, I was able to get my master's for it, and my master's was apparently good enough to also get a PhD. Which, by the way, doesn't mean that I'm a professor. I do not want to be a professor. I turned down the faculty that they offered me, because the reason I've done this, as I said before, is the reason I followed this track is because I felt in my executive meetings that I needed to catch up with people who have gone through high school, college, and university, and all these academic principles, all these frameworks, all this level of thinking, like that, you know. And I wasn't grown up in that. I wasn't trained in that. So my executive MBA did that. And my master's after that, my regular master's and my PhD for that, gave me the theoretical luggage, so to speak, to deal with that. I didn't do all of this because it's so great to research, because it's a lot of time and time consuming. But I can apply it in my daily job. Since then, I've been able to be part of teams that were definitely able to build sustainable business models. And my role in Huawei is also to do that. I was hired to help set up industry solution sales practices, sustainable business models for the region, and since 2015 in Huawei head office. If that gives you a bit of a background.
Completely, no, it's impressive, and I think it touches a very important thing between the productivity, the efficiency, and the sustainable economical models. And I think that is, and that takes me to the next question. And I think precisely because of that, before we go to Huawei and the digital transformation. So I think if you make a parallel, like you mentioned in 2008 with the massive financial crisis that the world went through, and that you were coming to Hawaii, but you end up actually in a startup in the US, and now what you are, which we are in a much more kind of, it's very kind of open to everything, because in 2008 it was pure financial Armageddon. Right now is healthcare, is social distance, is economical right now, and financial, which is becoming bigger and bigger. And at the same time, now the technology, and especially what you're talking about productivity, like we being here interviewing each other in 3 different parts of the world, or 4. So it's these kind of things that we have right now. And actually this is partly possible because of companies like Huawei, because independent of all the geopolitics, it's obvious that is innovation that allows us still to continue. Otherwise it will be probably much worse. So how do you see this moment that is kind of, that's why we create actually citiesabc, that is a very challenging moment, but as well a big opportunity. And the Chinese word for crisis is that it's both a crisis and both an opportunity. How do you see that? And as well, someone that comes from Netherlands, that is probably one of the most innovative economies in the world and societies, and as well right now being in probably the biggest technology company in the world. So I think it's an important thing, and I think to demystify, I think a lot of the problems we have in the world is people create myths, and I think we need to kill the myths from the root, like you said about your academic research, which I deeply respect.
Sure. So from a crisis comes an opportunity, but each opportunity gives a crisis. That already makes it circular, right? You can use the 2 characters in Chinese the other way around, and I think it's still close to the original meaning. My grandfather used to say that in order to make something shine, you have to apply friction. I think that's also something that comes close to it. The crisis in 2008 did not so much create a vacuum, but created the opportunity for smaller scaled companies to leverage, and larger scaled companies to either rethink, regroup perhaps, or downscale a bit, maybe. Not as a company, I mean, the company still stayed as big, but the teams that they work with, the departments that they had, became strategic business units, or became task forces, if you like. And the smaller companies became even more lean and mean, so to speak, as that they already were. It's survival, I guess, that I'm looking into this one. And I think that is a key driver. It's a key driver. But another one that sits underneath is that everything is connected, everything flows. And because everything flows and everything is connected, the crisis that is today is not the same one that it was yesterday, and it's also not the same one that it is tomorrow. You might give it the same name, for example, COVID-19, because we have a pandemic. It is a global crisis, but the crisis from COVID yesterday is a different one than today because things are in motion. And I think that's where the opportunity comes in. And if you have an understanding, or if you're able to find an understanding, to see through this, to see the line, almost like a surfer sees the surf, almost like, like a surfer sees the surf, or like a hang glider person sees the heat where he needs to go through up in the air to get his next wave of gliding his hang glider a bit higher up in the air because he needs to follow, the rhythm, or a kite flyer, that kind of idea. I think if you're able to see through things, and if you're able to see the hidden, well, not even the hidden lines, if you're able to see the lines that are in front of you, then I think you're very well able to grab them, or to grasp them, or to get a hold on them and to follow them, or to take them towards you and knit something else, almost like knitting. It's a bit metaphoric here. I realize that.
It's fantastic. No,
but it's I think it's a good analogy. I think it's a good analogy. So crisis and opportunity, yes, go hand in hand.
No, very interesting. So, and this touches as well everything that is about digital transformation, because in the end of the day, right now, only the companies that are digital transformed will survive. There's no doubt right now, and a lot of companies that were struggling with that cannot even just get out of this without digital transformation. So how do you see that being you? And ultimately, digital transformation became the single most important role for any organization worldwide, whatever is small or big.
True.
So,
true, but also partially not. If you think about it now, what is needed the most now in this world in turmoil? What is needed the most now are face masks. A very tangible product, not much digital about it, right? If you think about how to produce out of machines that are not meant for it, ventilators, and then the digital part comes in to accelerate that. Because a digital process for all the logistics and the back office and the systems behind it, for a factory that needs to convert itself into making masks and not socks or not shirts, for example. That's where the digital transformation sits in the back end. In the middle sits where a machine that's already there, but it needs a small adapter, and a 3D printer can do that. But where's the design? How do I design a Y-shaped tool that I can use for two tubes, so two persons at the same time can make use of this ventilator? Someone has that design maybe at the other side of the world. This is an email or an upload or a download. This is digitally sharing of information, and then it goes as an image or as a design into a 3D printer, and then the 3D printer prints it. And on top of all these things, so this is where the mid section sits. So the lower section is where digital transformation sits in the back end, making masks. This is where middleware sits. There is a ventilator kind of machine, but we need some tooling on top of this, and 3D printers are examples to support with that. On top of this sits where the acceleration and business enablement comes in. And this is where I come from. And this is where my level of work sits. A digital platform, as I call it. A digital platform being a horizontal layer of converged, combined technology that can bridge information silos. And not from a technical point of view, but from a principle point of view. So the principle of a digital platform is something that overlays different information silos. Perhaps the idea to create a digital twin of certain operations, a digital twin of an economy, for example, or a digital twin of hospital operations. Because another example in this case could be sometimes locations and venues are being transformed to be hospitals, but are not designed for that. Gyms, event and congress venues, large halls, maybe even an airport hangar where they park the planes. They now park it out in the tarmac, but maybe the hangar itself is big enough, or a hall anywhere, or a hotel that now needs to become a hospital, that kind of thing. So imagine PC workplaces are being installed everywhere, but the tools on these PC workplaces are not installed. These tools on these PC workplaces are coming from a cloud-enabled system where digital transformation has a digital twin of hospital operations, and it can be provided as a system to use for the nurses and the medical specialists who are now in this location that by nature was not designed to be a hospital, but they have to do hospital work. So that is where I think the digital transformation part comes in. To me, digital transformation is not about doing projects and working within a certain budget and following a certain roadmap. For me, digital transformation is the opposite. Digital transformation is a journey, and this journey is horizontal, mostly, preferably a little slightly up, because we want to move higher up the value chain. And as we move higher up the value chain, we're embracing more programs and more initiatives that will help us move higher up that value chain. For example, in smart cities, a digital transformation journey for a smart city does not have a beginning and an ending. It's just moving, and it's connecting and linking programs and initiatives that will help move that city higher up the value chain.
That's fantastic. Actually, that touches the two areas of the central for this interview. So I think on that I have a fundamental question that I would like to see how you answer that, especially in big corporations and working with some of the leading organizations and governments and cities in the world. So all of this from a theoretical perspective is perfection, but the challenge, like you said, is how we make the journey work. Because I think if you look, for instance, right now, there was a study that came from Harvard Business Review and different all the research centers that I think right now around 70% of the CFOs are ready right now to keep their people working from home or remotely. Okay, that's point one. But point two is that we have, and for instance, I've been working with multiple governments, we have zero digital transformation. And for instance, my last book was written mostly because I found out that talking with governments, that most of them don't even knew the basic concepts. And for instance, we talk about smart cities. And if you look at really smart cities in the world, we have around 70, and most of them are between Europe and China, of course. And then you have some kind of patterns that we have patterns, not really cities. So I think this part of the journey is very, very critical. And normally you do it for two reasons. And I think you do it because there's a crisis or like a pain, or you do it because of incentive. How do you see that, especially in so much organizations? That's not my research, but it's kind of my constitution.
Sure.
People. So how do you see that part? Because it's a very important thing is that people, even for instance, just an example, even in developers, suddenly you are doing something and you ask another, suddenly you have to do another thing because suddenly everything changed. And for instance, we have the cases with very high profile people in big organizations that suddenly they cannot nail that, because then there's the ego, there's the position, there's the comfort, there's a lot of these things. So there's a lot of things that come to the journey. And I think, how do you nail that, especially being in so big organizations like you are?
Well, let's talk about market first. And for example, governments or city mayors, maybe. There's different types of city mayors, again, different personas who have different characteristics and different personality traits and what have you. Some of them are the white collar kind of mayor. The other ones are very down to earth, sneakers, jeans, jersey or t-shirt, what have you. And others are very visionary almost. They don't see themselves as a mayor. They see themselves as an executive, and they got stuff to manage, and their city is like a corporation. So I think there's a third component on top of the two, or alongside of the two that you already mentioned, which is the incentive part or the crisis part. I think the third one sits with ambition and vision and passion. So having a city mayor who thinks not of him or herself as a city mayor, but more like an executive that has a business to run, for example, that has a great vision on what the city should be. What is the position of this city? How do I brand this city? How do I talk to others? For example, me. So how do they talk to me, and how do they trigger my interest that I'm willing to invest with them in this city, which is different from I have a technology stack and great solutions and products. And these are the features and the functionalities, and this is what it does. And I got 20 more than my competition, so you should buy mine, and that kind of idea. And then they purchase stuff from me, because that's not the kind of mayor, I think, that drives it. I find that within cities, vision, leadership, and guts. This is what we do. This is how I see my city. This is what I stand for as a city. This is what I want to be as a city. This is where I want to be in the coming 10 years. This is how I'm going there. This is why I'm looking for investors to invest with me, to embark on this journey. As we said, this digital transformation journey, this road to digital transformation. And maybe the road to digital transformation is the fourth industrial revolution. I don't know. It could be. It can carry that very well. It could be a driver for it, perhaps, or an ambition to aspire or achieve. So that's where I think it is. If you then look at Huawei, we as a company are doing a number of things within these spheres, if you like. Firstly, we have to acknowledge, as a company founded in 1987, we are not a digital native company at all. When we started, there wasn't much digital to begin with, but as a company, we were very analog and very physical. We had factories that were making products, and these products had to go via a logistics channel into the market, and so on and so forth. But over the years, I think 2015, 2016 was the time that internally we learned also for ourselves, and we found out also for ourselves that it makes much more sense if our global operations would have a digital twin. If there's a digital twin of our global operations, because that has two benefits. Number one, if we want to apply new business models, or if we need to adapt to change because of crisis, or because of headwind, or because of economic principles or environments, or conjunctural issues, then we have to adapt. And this adaptation capability, and then applying this throughout the company, goes faster and better from a digital point of view than from a physical point of view. I can give you one example. We have at one point we had the ambition to achieve $100 billion revenue. That was a milestone that we wanted to achieve a few years ago, and we did. But in order to achieve that, we also need to recruit. We need to recruit a number of people. If you think that you're doing 50 or 60 billion US dollars in 2000, what is it, 11 or 12, somewhere in that time frame, perhaps 2010, somewhere in that time frame, 50, 60 billion US dollar, and you're doing that with 110,000 people worldwide. So we want to double the revenue, so let's double the people. Onboarding another 110,000 people would just take too much time to even be busy with business. So from a digital point of view, if you're able to recruit, if you're able to accelerate the process of scanning the different resumes, for example, having the first initial talks with people, maybe via a computerized system or via a system that you and I are using right now for this interview, is shortening the time tremendously, increases productivity, and allows us to accelerate certain processes. So this is an example of digital services, and where we as a company also transformed ourselves from being a non-digital native company into a company that has a completely digitalized internal process from everything and anything. And that goes from asset management, that goes to the VIP customer reception in our offices, that goes to our daily operations for providing our employees with breakfast and lunch and dinner, and the logistics behind it, that goes to safety and security on all of our campuses. And right now, as we speak, every day, all our global workforce, and now we are close to 200,000 worldwide, are, I was going to say forced, but that's not what I mean, are obligated to report their health on a daily basis. Now, if almost 200,000 people worldwide need to tell you every morning, do you have a cough, yes or no? In what country are you? Have you been in touch with people who come from certain areas? And so on and so forth. Just a daily check. This was, I think, a decision that took an hour to make. And it took about 10 minutes to roll out an application like that throughout our organization. So everybody worldwide can receive a message in their email that they can save somewhere. It's an icon on your desktop. It's a thing that sits in your email or on your mobile phone. You click it in the morning, it opens up and it asks you, where are you? In my case, I'm in Thailand. And I answer questions. What's my temperature? This. Cough? No. Trouble breathing? No. Fever? No. Chest pain? No. Have you been in contact with? No. Did you meet? Did anybody in your family? And so on and so forth. And then submit to have a global view worldwide on how, what the status of the company is in relationship to the COVID-19 infections and so on and so forth. All possible because of digital transformation that we are in the middle of. And as a result, we've turned this into systems and services that are embedded in a platform, and this platform is being used internally. But we're also using this platform to take it out of our business operations, to delete everything that sits inside that relates to us. So it becomes an open platform that has a bit of templates, has a lot of capabilities, and it can be applied to our customers and our partners worldwide, which is part of my job as a Chief Digital Transformation Officer. I help our partners and our customers with their digital journey. And eventually we are able to provide a digital platform that they can put in place in such a way that it helps them be most efficient in their daily operations.
That's amazing. And I think this shows as well a shift on operation capacity that especially Huawei is showing worldwide, independent of all the issues that are associated. And I think people forget to see the point. The point is that you guys, like you said, in 20 years, for instance, Professor Yu Xiang, we were having an interview with him and saying that just 20 years ago, the Chinese economy was 20% of the US economy. And now it passed the US economy, actually less than 20 years ago. But well, that to one specific question related with the process of digital transformation. And I think you mentioned two things that are critical. So we have a crisis or pain, the incentive and the passion, or the vision, or as well the aspiration part. So
correct.
I want to repeat on this because you're showing the capacity of innovation, the capacity of changing as fast as you've been doing. But the challenge is that the world around us is not seeing that. Okay, and that's the fundamental problem. And I think there's 2 points that are happening right now. They're very scary. For instance, one thing is what happened in the last couple of weeks that people are accusing, for instance, touching right now 5G, that 5G is kind of this kind of fake, stupid myths. And a lot of these things are really, for me, it gets me deeply nervous, or how people spend resources using all the digital tools to kind of annihilate all the digital tools, which is a paradox. But this is happening quite substantial. For instance, right now, I was sent by quite a reputable person that sent me a video saying, Dinis, did you saw this about 5G being destroyed? And I saw the video from the beginning to the end, and I knew there was a complete hoax. But the point is that the video was done with the extreme quality and a lot of work there. So I think the problem right now is and this touches, I think, a very important thing. So you guys are leaders in 5G telecommunications and as well smart cities technology. But we have a challenge not only to put people using this is for the good of people, but right now as well, people that are afraid of change to use the same exactly tools or similar to deny and change this. And this is not, we can no longer ignore this, because in the end of the day, right now, this is affecting almost 60% of the world economy or more. So how do you see that part being as well a pragmatist and a theoretical that you've been showing in this interview, which is amazing. So it's this part, and I think this is the devil is on details. How can we change this? Because this is going to be a massive problem from a geopolitics, but as well from a psychological mentality, and as well from an economical financial point.
Well, the beauty of human beings is that they are so unpredictable.
That's for sure.
and the trouble of human beings is that they are so unpredictable. I think if everything, no, let's rephrase that. Not what I think, or everything. Let's rephrase that. The computer that you're using right now is, and I'm guessing here, is probably a replacement of a computer that you used before. And the computer that you used before is also a replacement of a computer that you used before that. The computer that you use now probably looks a little the same as the one you had before, and the one you had before that, and the one you had before that. It has a screen, it has a keypad or a keyboard, it has a mouse or touch screen or whatever. So basically, the whole form factor didn't change much. But if you look at what your computer is capable of doing now versus the previous one and the one before, is a tremendous change. Same for your smartphone. The smartphone you have now is the replacement of the one you had before, and the one before that, and the one before that. It looks the same. It's a square that fits your hand. It has a touch screen. Playing a game on your smartphone today is a completely different user experience than playing that, maybe that even same game 10, 12, or 14 years ago, where that phone still had a size like that, and it fits in your hand. So the capabilities of that item, the capabilities of those devices have changed tremendously. Now, did this get you uncomfortable, or did this got you a little scared, or did this make you a little worried? Or your friends around you who have gone through the same change process with their devices, did that make them slightly worried or slightly troubled? I think not. I think not. And the point I'm trying to make is, I think for technology, two things are important. The key thing for technology is it is there to support. It is supposed to help us do better what we already do best. Do better what we already do best. It's the key purpose of technology. Technology can allow us to do that. The second thing that technology should not let us do that is to be so visible and to be so clear and to be so in our face. Meaning, as I said before, the device that you hold in your hand from a form factor point of view didn't change much over the last 10, 15 years or 20 years. But the capability, the capacity, the usability, the intuitiveness of the machines and the way to use them are so tremendously different from a long time ago. And the computing power that sits within the chipsets and the capabilities of that device that is able of doing this, I think that's where technology should be, and that's where technology comes from. If we look at this from a bigger point of view, these devices have access to information that looks rather real. The websites that you can check and cross-check, and the information stream that comes your way, and the background checks that you would like to do, will lead you to sets of information that look very genuine. Reports comes out. It looks rather academic even. It's not that easy to really distinguish all these information streams from fake and unfake, from real and unreal, from making sense to making no sense at all. And I think that's where the difficulty comes in with a vast amount of people that perhaps are being fed with so much sets of information that it almost becomes a reality that 5G indeed is causing viruses, for example, which I think they don't. But even if they do, I don't think setting them on fire is getting rid of it.
Oh, my problem. No,
for example,
scientists say precisely the contrary, but there's a lot of scientific studies. That's the problem right now. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. But there's a lot of scientific studies on one subject that look at it from a certain angle. I think what should make sense to all of us is that if we would be able to have a 360 view on all these different angles, presented and described to us as if we are 4 or 5 years old almost, to get a very good understanding of this one item where all these different reports are circling around for. And I think that's the difficulty. it is not easy to distinguish in a vast amount of information that circles around one topic what these topics are. And that's because there is algorithms behind it. If I click the wrong link, or if I click the wrong link, then these algorithms think that this is my interest and is going to feed me more of that interest that maybe has nothing to do with me, but everything to do with the topic that I clicked on. And that creates an environment perhaps where it's not that easy always to determine a reality from something that's bollocks sometimes. And technology should, and technology can, have the ability to separate that. It's not very difficult, I think, in all these messages worldwide, and all these systems and services that are working together and that are creating all these messages in a timeline or in a feed, and that are linking people with the same ideas or people with similar interests, to apply an algorithm that says, wait a minute, here we need to, in the top of the screen should be an icon, and here should also be an icon, and here should also be an icon. And these icons tell you a bit about the level of academic trust, academic reality, academic or scientific proof or not, whether it's a hunch, whether it's a theory or practical, that kind of idea. I think it's time in the world to rethink where we are right now with these global information systems, and whether they are on par with where the world needs it or where the world has it. Because as I said when I started this answer, technology should not be in your face. Your smartphone now is doing tremendously great things in a much better and more efficient way than it has ever done before with the previous one that you had in your hands. And it didn't frighten you that much, right? It wasn't on a Friday night you had form factor number one, it could do something, and on Monday you got something else that looked completely different, that heated up in a different way and felt very uncomfortable to use. It's not like that. And the second thing I said when I answered this question is, technology should help us do better what we already do best. And I think these two together would create a good baseline, I think, for scholars, researchers, academics, users, and people from all over the world to work together and to create an environment that is indeed doing better what we already do best.
Completely. So picking on that, I know that Hawaii at the moment is probably the biggest technology investing in innovation in the world, according to the numbers that are public. So I know that, if you look at the three major developers that are coming out of Hawaii, 5G and smart cities are two of them. You have as well a lot of things in healthcare. Can you tell us where you see the most cutting edge things you've been doing, and how you see that to solve a lot of the problems you're solving right now and we're facing right now?
Well, I'd like to add AI as well.
Yeah.
Things like machine learning, deep learning, and other forms of artificial intelligent components that work together as one.
Yes.
Excuse me, I'm in an aircon room, so the dry air here
no worries.
triggers my throat. So I'd like to add AI as well. 5G is not just a connectivity layer, in my opinion. It's an intelligent connectivity layer. It understands the device that you're working from, and it will optimize the connection to it. It will beam individually to your device another form of set of optimizations to enhance your user experience versus me, who stands next to you in line in a supermarket, for example, on an automobile network that is also 5G enabled, and it also has AI capabilities to maximize and optimize the connection for the person next to me in line. So AI and 5G are tightly coupled. AI is a capability within a connectivity layer, an intelligent connectivity layer, and the intelligent connectivity layer is 5G. The other parts that go along with it is the ability of these networks and the ability of these infrastructures to understand the business that it is being applied for. So I can give you one example. If there is a data center that is used for a university, and that university has a network of data centers and services, so that becomes a nationwide or a regional infrastructure for education. It has IT infrastructure, connectivity, it has server, storage, computing power, everything. Suppose I would reshape this infrastructure a little bit, because the faculty of the university where this infrastructure is being used for is adding a faculty for medical. So here comes a part of the university that's now becoming or going to become a medical university, or a part of a medical university. So this means that this education infrastructure should understand a little bit more about healthcare, but it doesn't, so it needs to be programmed. After the programs, it needs to be configured and pre-configured and pre-staged. That's the old-fashioned way of doing it. Another old-fashioned way of doing it would be, if I am a bank and I got a data center and my equipment is out of date, and usually in banks that is after 6 or 7 months, because they have a high churn rate. They want to have the fastest computers, so not many updates. So they donate a number of these servers that they had in their data center, and they donate it to a college or a high school or a primary school, or they donate it to a hospital or a care center. Manually speaking, physically speaking, this equipment that comes from the bank needs to be wiped, needs to be refurbished, needs to be cleaned up, needs to have the latest operating system again before it goes into the data center of the university, and before it can be programmed to support the world of education, or if this goes into a data center of a care center or a hospital, it can do hospital things. There's also another way of doing it that links the world of 5G and the world of AI to the world of IT infrastructures, which is also what Huawei looks at. Huawei calls this the business-driven ICT infrastructure. A business-driven ICT infrastructure is a horizontal layer of technology that has so many capabilities and features and functionalities and technologies that the only thing it needs to do is it needs to understand what it is being used for. So if I am a bank, I take a server out of the data center from the bank and I plug it into the rack of the university. Without pre-configuration, without pre-staging, but with artificial intelligence components, it will talk to the systems and services around itself, and it will pre-program and pre-stage itself. It will understand, without human interference, that the rack that it is now part of, and where it's been shoved in as a pizza box, a server, it will understand that it is now part of a server farm for healthcare, and it will pre-configure, pre-stage itself. Maybe via backup on 5G or other mechanisms, it can retrieve specific settings out of this horizontal layer of technology, a business-driven ICT infrastructure, a BDII, to further optimize its capability to best support, do better what it already has done best, being the fastest server in the industry with the highest level of computing power, to now support the healthcare industry, even though it was a server that came out of a rack for finance. Those are a few examples where technology works together and can work together autonomously almost for maybe 70 or 80% of the time, where the remaining 30 or 20% can be used to really optimize, to maximize this principle of doing better what we already do best. That's one example. Another example where we come in, because this is rather big, a data center for a hospital is a huge environment. It almost looks like the back of a truck, a real big container. You can go in with multiple people even. It is a huge, massive environment, venue almost. But your smartphone, let's take the Huawei smartphone, for example, the recently announced P40, but also the ones before that. The tiniest chipsets and the tiniest processors within that handheld, so not the thing that is a size where you can walk in, but this is the thing that you hold in your hand, also has the same capabilities. It will understand the way you use it. And if this is a hand-me-down, so after a year or 2 years when you think you should have the latest smartphone and your kids can use your older smartphone, you wipe it, you let them pre-install their apps for them, maybe their homework apps and their school apps, for example, and their spare time apps and their games. But as your kids are using the phone that they got from you, which is maybe 2 years old, eventually this phone will readapt itself again. This device will understand the behavior of the kid, how the kid uses it. And there's two specific features that go along with this. It sits with the processing part, and it sits with the AI capability of it. The front camera of that smartphone and an app on that smartphone called StorySign combined can help, for example, children who are deaf. Because via this app that opens the camera, you can read children's books. So on the screen of your camera, you're looking at the page, on the screen of your phone that takes the image of the book that you're reading with your child or person who is deaf. It will understand what is written. It will present an avatar that actually speaks sign language by itself. The child can speak back to the screen in sign language, and out comes a voice out of the phone. So the dad or the mom who sits next to the child, or the brother or the cousin or a teacher who sits next to the child, who today needs to speak sign language first before this can happen. But now this could be any teacher, because it hears what the child is saying as the child speaks sign language. Is an example. Children who are young but have a trouble with the retina of their eye don't have the ability to explain very well what goes on with their eyesight. But with the right AI components and the right applications making use of the screen setting and of the front camera of your smartphone, can check facial features, can look into details of the eye of a child who cannot speak for itself, saying that it's losing eyesight. But the systems and the services behind it and the tooling that the child has with this combination of mobile networks like 5G and AI enabling within, and optimizing connections to the device, and AI enabling within the device, allows at an earlier stage to understand if the eyesight of the child is retreating, and therefore can give a signal to parents or maybe even medical specialists. So you're faster on the duty, so to speak. And in a bigger scale related to COVID-19, this creates a unique environment where technology combined with medical specialists and manual and analog and digital combined with mobile broadband networks around us at a high level of security support us in this digital transformational process without disrupting it or without making people scared of it.
And that's amazing. So we are in more or less 1 hour interview. So I will the last question, I think, for keeping, and I think we'll put in the beginning of the interview the list of the topics we've been talking, and there's also some of the links to your profile and things like that. But can you just give us I know that Huawei has been doing a lot of things in terms of COVID-19 and things related like EI, health, AI healthcare, which partly mentioned, but could you go a bit more in detail? I think it's interesting to see right now from the theory to the practices, and as well some of the things that have been doing at that level. That's quite interesting to wrap up. And of course we could talk for hours, but I think to keep it in 1 hour.
Yes, we could. Yes, we could.
A lot of exciting things here.
So from a healthcare point of view, we already have in place, and we're rolling this out as well, along with many others. Not only partners within our ecosystem, but also technology vendors are building this up very high up. There is an ability to use the scans of CT scanners, a lung scan taken with a CT scanner. These medical images usually go into a picture archiving and communication system, a PACS system, where a medical specialist has access to, meaning there's a big screen. In the screen, there is patient files. A medical specialist can click on one of these files and can open up these medical images, and then needs to look for the differences and the similarities from a diagnostics point of view. We found out that it takes about 10 to 12 minutes for a medical specialist to do this and to come up with a diagnosis. Then it takes between 2 and 5 minutes for the medical specialist to write a report about it. And then these medical images combined with this paper, this medical report combined, goes to a specialist team that will have a conversation with the patient, for example. We found that there is a possibility to use AI that can work with algorithms that can look into these images faster, even more accurate, to find out what are the differences and what are the similarities between these pictures of a lung in order to determine if there are similarities and differences between, for example, someone who has a lung that is infected with the damage part that COVID-19 leaves behind, or that COVID-19 puts in place. So AI diagnostics and facilitating the back-end systems and services to help do that faster and more optimized and with a higher level of computing power is an example where systems and services of Huawei are part of, and hospitals are using that. The digital twin of a hospital, so having physical hospital operations with systems and services and having that digitalized, whereby as a result, out of cloud-based principles, we can provide from a digital point of view hospital services to locations that are not meant to be a hospital, but where medical specialists and doctors are working, is another example where we are able to distribute these systems and services and settings in such a way that it utilizes the activation of such a hospital faster than if this would all be had to be done physical. The ability for remote diagnostics, clinical collaboration services, telehealth, using similar or maybe even the same way of working that you and I are using right now for this interview are examples of this. Imagine people who are flying in from a certain area because they are systems or maintenance engineers. They fly over the world and they come back to their home country and they need to be in self-quarantine or home quarantine. All of a sudden, these solutions that you and I are using right now for this interview are examples of how teleconsult and telehealth can be helped and can be put in place to reduce the risk of face-to-face and personal contact for people who need to knock your door every other hour to check if you're still okay, to check your temperature through a small ledge of the door if that's open, that kind of thing. Same goes for people who are coming to an emergency hospital who are checked maybe digitally via cameras that can do body temperature checks and that can maybe understand someone is feverish. So a person needs to get out of line and goes to a quarantine room and then needs to speak to a medical specialist or a nurse. Today, this is rather physical. There's a nurse with all protective clothing in such a room having a conversation with you, but this could very well be a place at the airport where the gate that opens, where you pass with your passport or your boarding pass, that understands you're a little feverish, where maybe someone can guide you to a quarantine room, and as you close the door, a screen opens up and there physically is a medical specialist behind the screen, and that can use remote communication to have a conversation with you and to support that further. The third part that comes into this particular case is then there is a call out to medical specialists, nurses, Red Cross people who have retired, who maybe left the hospital 20 years ago for a new career, but now need to re-enter or can re-enter, but this is 15 or 20 years ago, so they need to be brought up to speed on the latest and greatest what healthcare is today to understand the latest principles and ways of working. So a remote telehealth and telemedicine and teleconsult solution becomes now a remote learning application where people, again, without being in the same room, can be trained, can be taught, and maybe even can be certified to provide certain medical activities or teachings and what have you. And the same goes for kids who are not allowed to go to school anymore, but do need, their daily activities and do need their daily learnings. So remote learning, remote classrooms, that kind of thing are examples of stitching together via a horizontal layer of digital technology, the different pieces of technology that we use from industry number one, for example, for video conferencing, into industries for healthcare, remote learning, and education.
Fantastic. I think probably we'll pick for a new interview in the future about smart cities, but I would like to finish with that because I think it's the epicenter of mankind. And I know that you are a researcher. I think we touch a lot of digital transformation, all the different technologies as well that OI is using. And we're going to put notes within the interview and the article. So last thing is your views about smart city. You touched partly, but how you see
Sure.
as well that at this specific stage of development of humanity, but as well on a positive note, how do you see the smart cities and
Sure.
concrete things, like you said, for mayors that right now are struggling, and as well for
Very
the
much,
city councils
yes,
and
very
organizations?
much. So I said before that the principle of a digital twin would make sense. A digital twin of everything physical in your city, a digital twin of your city economics or the city economy, a digital twin of daily operations and what have you. An intelligent operations center that functions as a brain and a nervous system of a smart city. The more digital a city already is today, I think the better utilized such a city is to cope with, number one, this pandemic that now stresses the city, and where from a digital point of view, systems and services to deal with this and to help flatten the curve can be put in place a little faster if there is a digital version of that city. The more physical the city is, probably the longer it will take to put all these systems and services in place. Secondly, what I'd like to mention about this sits a bit with scalability. I think one smart city is not a smart city. I love to talk about networks or grid, like a beehive kind of idea, where everything is connected. A network of smart cities creates a smart region. A network of smart cities in a smart region and a network of smart regions create a smart nation. Technically speaking, the world is flat. Thomas Friedman already mentioned that in his book. And boy, was he right. The world is flat from a technology point of view. Borderless as well. So the more digital things are, a network of smart cities creates a smart nation, and the smarter the nation, the easier it integrates to the surrounding nations to further help deal with this pandemic. Technology helps us do better what we already do best. So if this is a smart city, then technology in a smart city helps do better what already goes very well and does best in that city.
Fantastic. I think, we keep around 1 hour, which is there's a lot of things here from the theoretical to the practice. It's really an honor. I don't know, Professor, if you want to give a wrap-up note, but if not, we'll finish for now. And I want to thank you for this insightful and fantastic interview.
My pleasure. If I can help you again, then my pleasure to do so.